we need to talk about the nepotism that's ruining the football program over at the University of Iowa. Now, some of you may not know what's going on, as you might just be checking the football box scores on Sunday morning, and then you might be wondering if the Iowa score was accidentally a misprint from the era of leather helmets and no forward passes. So, for those of you who are not up to speed on the country's slowest offense, here's the deal. Iowa's head coach Kirk Ferentz, who has been with the Hawkeyes since damn near the 1900s, has all three of his sons come through the program as players during his tenure. Now, his oldest son, Brian, was hired to be the offensive line coach in 2012 after 3 years as an assistant with the New England Patriots organization. Well, if you follow football at any level, then you know that nepotism is beyond commonplace. Plenty of coaches throughout the country have their children on staff or at some point in time on staff in some capacity. The list is endless. Bill Belichick, Mike Shanahan, Marvin Lewis, Pete Carroll, Jeff Fisher, Andy Reid, Steve Spurrier, Bobby Bowden, Shane Beamer, Joe Paterno. And it might be easier to actually make a list of coaches who didn't employ their own kids. So what makes Kirk Ferentz and Brian Ferentz arrangement any different? Well, first of all, the University of Iowa actually has rules in place and regulations that are supposed to prevent nepotism. In order to get around those rules in 2012, the program was forced to lie and cover up Kirk had any hand in hiring Brian to be on staff. And despite Brian saying that the reason he took the job was because his father called him up and asked him to apply. And after that initial lie, though, the Iowa guardrail that was supposedly was put in place to give the appearance of objectivity is that for the last 11 seasons, Brian Ferentz is technically been a direct report of the athletic director, Gary Barta, and not the head coach, his father, even though that he's the offensive coordinator. So technically, father and son both have the same boss that independent of any input from Brian's father, decided after 5 seasons of coaching his own brothers on the offensive line that Brian was ready for the promotion to be the offensive coordinator. And that brings me to my next point on why this is an extra special brand of nepotism. Because Brian Ferentz absolutely, objectively sucks at his job. And in the last 5 recruiting classes, Iowa has landed 2 total 4-star skill position players, Arlen Bruce and Keegan Johnson. And there would have been a third, but 2023 running back Kendrick Raphael saw the offense in action and was like, nah, this ain't for me, player. So he can't recruit. So what? Some people are more into being innovators and less salesmen. Well, not just Brian Ferentz. He managed to have 7+ future NFL players on his 2018 and 2019 offenses and never ranked better than 86th in the country in those seasons. But hey, sometimes it's about getting your own players into your system, right? So let's look at the last 3 years, over which they've gone a very respectable 19-9. Well, the Hawkeyes went from 40th nationally in points per game during the COVID-shortened 2020 season to 99th last year. And this year, they're sitting at 127th, just ahead of the University of Colorado, whose offense is putrid. And in offensive yardage, which Kirk Ferentz has called an overrated stat, Iowa went from 13th in the Big Ten last year to dead last in the country this year, and so far behind last place in the Big Ten that if you doubled their output, they would still only be in 3rd place. Do you realize how ridiculous that is? There are statistics and there are realities that can be used to crush every single excuse to be continuing to employ the head coach's son as the Hawkeyes play caller. For those who say that Iowa's a running team and they shouldn't expect to put up big numbers in the passing game, well, there are currently 38 FBS players that have rushed for more yards than Iowa has as an entire team. Plus, the Iowa Hawkeyes have not had a running back selected in the NFL draft since 2009. And for those that say that Iowa is all about playing for the field goal, well, 4 out of every 10 possessions for Iowa this year have ended without one single first down. And they aren't playing for a field goal. They're lucky if they ever attempt a field goal. Now, 6 times in the last calendar year, Iowa has been held to 7 points or less. and they only have 18 offensive touchdowns in their last 14 games. That's barely more than one a game. And you can tell yourself, well, that's just Big Ten football. But isn't Marvin Harrison Jr. playing in the same Big Ten as Iowa? He has 12 touchdowns in his last 7 games, all by himself at Ohio State. Now, Gary Barta, Brian's real boss, says that they're not going to evaluate the status of any position coach until the end of the season, which means we're going to get to see the worst offense in football take the field 6 more times this year, starting with a guaranteed bloodbath at Ohio State on October 22nd. And we don't have the ability to see Iowa's struggles through a father's eyes. All we see from the outside is that it is an offense that can't gain yards, can't score, can't recruit, and has had one wide receiver selected in the NFL draft since 2013. Now, if Brian Ferentz didn't have his father's last name, what defense would there be for keeping him on? I can't think of a single defense on earth that would be good enough to justify keeping him. Not even Iowa's. Let that sink in.